The wind-up in the Blue Ridge Mountains don't just blow. It tells stories. Some are gentle whispers in the pines, and some are screaming warnings. That day, the sky turned a bruised purple, the color of a 3-day-old heartache, and the air smelled heavy like metal. June was driving her little red car way too fast on roads that were way too twisty. She was running from a city life that felt like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed high ground and silence. The first snowflake hit her windshield like a white moth, then another, and suddenly the world went blind. Her tires hit a patch of black ice, slicker than spit on a griddle, and she spun. The world tilted. There was a loud crunch of metal on oak, and then darkness took her. Clay was splitting wood out back of his grandfather's old cabin when he heard the noise. It wasn't the wind. It was the unnatural sound of something man-made breaking against the mountain. Clay was a man built of silence and hard work, living up here to keep the noise of the world away. He almost didn't go check. The storm was fixin' to be a mean one, a true whiteout. But something in his gut, maybe the same instinct that tells a deer to freeze, told him to move. He grabbed his heavy wool coat and a flashlight. He found the red car wrapped around a hickory tree about a half-mile down his driveway. A woman was slumped over the wheel, blood trickling down her forehead like a dark river on snow. He didn't think. He just pulled her free, her body light as a bird in his arms, and carried her back through the rising howl of the wind toward the only light for miles. When June woke up, the world was orange and smelled like burning cedar. She was on an old sofa, covered in quilts that felt heavy and safe. Her head throbbed something fierce. A man was kneeling by a stone fireplace, feeding logs into a blaze that roared like a captured beast. He had shoulders as wide as a doorframe and hair the color of wet bark. He turned, and his eyes were a startling, clear blue, like the sky after a summer rain. "You're awake," he said, his voice deep and rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "You took a nasty bump. You're safe now, but you ain't going nowhere. The road is gone, buried under 3 feet of snow already." Fear spiked in her chest, trapped with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. But looking at his steady hands, the blizzard settled over the mountain like a thick wool blanket, cutting them off completely. The power lines went down in the first hour, leaving them with only the firelight and a few oil lamps. The cabin was sturdy, built from logs thick enough to stop a bear, but the wind screamed outside, shaking the windows in their frames. Clay moved with an easy economy, boarding up the biggest window when a branch cracked against it. June felt useless, sitting there with her head spinning. "Can I help?" she asked, her voice sounding small. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. "Just stay warm," he said, not unkindly. "This mountain tries to freeze anything that doesn't fight back. Your job right now is just to keep breathing." It was a strange command, but up here it felt like the most important one. By the second day, the cabin fever started to itch beneath their skin. The space was too small for 2 people carrying so much unspoken baggage. June learned his name was Clay, and that he carved intricate wooden birds that sat on the mantelpiece. He learned her name was June, and that she jumped at loud noises. They moved around each other carefully, like 2 stray cats trapped in a shed. The silence between them was louder than the storm outside. Clay was a fortress with the drawbridge pulled up tight. June, usually a chatterbox when nervous, found her words drying up in his presence. The tension wasn't just fear of the storm. It was the humming energy of 2 strangers forced into intimacy. Every time their hands brushed while reaching for the coffee pot, a jolt went through the room that had nothing to do with the cold. To keep the madness at bay, Clay handed her a knife and a block of soft pine wood on the 3rd afternoon. "Keep your hands busy," he muttered. "Mind wanders less that way." She'd never carved anything in her life. He sat close, showing her how to angle the blade so she wouldn't slice her thumb. His hands over hers were warm and calloused, confident in a way that made her breath hitch. They worked for hours in silence, the only sounds the scrape of steel on wood and the popping fire. She ended up whittling something that looked vaguely like a lumpy potato, but he didn't laugh. "It's a start," he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. In that quiet work, a strange kind of synergy began to form, a shared focus that felt safer than talking. That night, the cold became a physical enemy. The fire wasn't enough. The temperature dropped so low the frost started creeping. The morning brought a strange shame, but also a new ease. They had survived the worst night. While Clay went outside to shovel a path to the woodshed, a task that took hours in the chest-deep drifts, June explored the cabin. She wasn't snooping, exactly. She was just looking for pieces of the man who had saved her. Tucked away on a high shelf, behind some dusty jars, she found an old leather sketchbook. Curiosity got the better of her. She opened it. The pages were filled with charcoal drawings. A lone wolf on a ridge, an empty swing set, a woman's hands holding a coffee cup. The drawings were haunting, filled with a deep, aching loneliness that tugged at something in her subconscious. They felt familiar, like a song she'd heard a long time ago. When Clay came back in, stomping snow off his boots, he saw the book in her hands. His face went hard as granite. In 2 strides, he crossed the room and snatched it from her. "That ain't yours to look at," he growled, his blue eyes turning stormy. It was the first real anger he'd shown. June stood up, her own temper flaring. "I was just looking. It's beautiful, Clay. Why hide it?" "Because some things are private," he snapped, tossing the book onto a high shelf. "You city folks think everything is for show. Up here, we keep our ghosts to ourselves." The conflict hung heavy in the air. It wasn't just about the book. It was about the walls he kept hitting, the walls she was desperately trying to climb without knowing why. They spent the rest of the day in separate corners. The cabin felt smaller than ever. The storm outside began to wane, the screaming wind turning into a low moan. The silence inside was worse. June felt a desperate need to connect, to fix the breach. She went to her duffel bag, which Clay had retrieved from her car. Buried at the bottom, wrapped in a silk scarf, was her greatest treasure. It was a bundle of letters, maybe 50 of them, tied together with a specific, rough blue twine. They were worn soft from being read 100 times. She sat by the fire, untied the twine, and started reading one randomly, needing the June stared at him, confused. "Yes, I signed them, Jay. How do you know that?" Then it hit her. The realization rolled over her like a slow avalanche. She looked at the man standing before her, the rugged, silent mountain man. She thought of the letters she'd received for 5 years from C. Letters full of descriptions of snowy owls, the smell of fresh sawdust, the deep ache of losing family, the fear of never being understood. Letters that were poetic and raw and had made her fall in love with a phantom. She looked at the charcoal smudge on his hand. "You're C," she whispered. "You're the woodcarver." For 5 years, they had been leaving letters in a hollowed-out oak tree on a popular hiking trail, a local legend called the Wishing Box. Strangers left notes. Sometimes other strangers answered. They had started randomly, a vent for her city frustrations answered by his mountain wisdom. It grew into a lifeline. They had shared their deepest fears, their silliest dreams, their very souls on paper, never knowing each other's names or faces. They had fallen in love in the dark, and now the lights were suddenly turned on. The air in the cabin crackled not just with cold, but with the overwhelming electricity of 2 souls finally recognizing each other in the physical. "The road will be clear by noon," Clay said, standing by the window. He didn't look happy about it. June stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "I guess I should pack my things," she said, testing him. She needed him to ask her to stay. She needed to know that the man in the letters and the man in the cabin were truly the same. Clay stayed silent for a long, agonizing moment. He watched a hawk circle in the blue sky. "You could," he said finally, turning to face her. "Or you could realize that some folks spend their whole lives looking for the person who holds the other half of their map." The plow rumbled past the end of the driveway, clearing the way to civilization. The driver honked, a harsh, intrusive sound. June picked up her duffel bag. Her heart felt like a stone dropping in a well. She walked toward the door. "Goodbye, Clay," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. She put her hand on the doorknob. She had to leave. She couldn't be the one to beg. She needed him to be brave just once outside of a letter. Clay crossed the room faster than the wind. His hand covered hers on the doorknob, stopping her. He didn't pull her into a Hollywood kiss. He just rested his forehead against hers, his breath warm on her skin. "Don't go," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm done writing letters, June. I want the real thing right here, every day. The snow brought you, and I'll be damned if I let the plow take you away." June dropped her bag. Outside, the snow sparkled like millions of diamonds scattered just for them. The storm was over, but their story was just getting started. Right there in the heart of the Blue Ridge.